This interview is being recorded for the Oral History Project, Black Student Life at Rutgers University, conducted by Leah Green. This interview is being conducted with Cheryl Wilson. This project is an historical account of Black student life and experiences in its context at Rutgers. Its purpose is to make this information available for academic study. The interviewee has the right to end the interview at any time. Before beginning, I'd like to know if you give permission for researchers to hear this tape.
Yes.
Do you give your permission to quote your statements?
Yes, I do.
Do you give permission to reproduce portions of your statements?
Yes.
And do you give permission to publish portions of your statements?
Yes, I do.
Okay. First question. What years were you a student at Rutgers, and what school were you affiliated with?
I attended Douglas College from 1985 to 1989.
Okay. When you were deciding on what colleges to apply and to attend, what drew you to come to Rutgers?
I only wanted to attend women's colleges. So I applied to Bennett College, which is a black women's college in North Carolina, Douglas College, and there was one other school. But the only school I applied to at Rutgers was Douglas. If I could not go to Douglas, which was the women's college, I was not coming to the university.
What clubs and organizations were you involved in, and what part did you play in any of them?
I was a writer for the Douglas College newspaper, which is called The Kalian. I was involved in the campus council of my residence halls. I was a resident of the Africana House, so I was involved in the Douglas College Global Village, although it was not the Global Village then. It was just the different houses. So I was a resident of the Africana House. And I was a member of BWABU, the Black Women's Association of Black Unity.
At Rutgers during that time, what were the major concerns of black students as a whole?
When I first arrived, the major concerns, actually of all students but as a whole, but black students in particular, was the issue of apartheid in South Africa. A lot of protests around there and getting companies to divest. Near the middle of my tenure here at Rutgers, it was more so the rights of black students at the university. And when I was, in 1987, they closed down the Africana House. And that was a big concern of all the black students at Rutgers University. That was like the biggest issue of my 4 years in terms of on-campus activism.
And what were some of the things that y'all did to try to protest against the closing of the house?
The Africana House was started in the 1960s, and due to low enrollment, they closed it. The only students who had enrolled in the Africana House was me, myself, and 2 other students. And then it was in a house that housed about 24 students. So they could not keep a house open for 24 students for just 3 individuals. So when I came back in the fall, there was all kinds of students living in the so-called Africana House, and it was no more. So I think the protest was, number one, they had closed it, but they also did not let us know. I come back in the fall, and it was just gone. So that's kind of what started.
What kind of things did y'all do to any letters were written, or what other clubs were involved in?
There were letters, there were meetings with the dean, and that was what they explained. We closed it because no one enrolled. And students said, well, you can't just close a historical unit at the university, particularly without notifying us. And so the next thing you know, students started moving in the residence hall, and we had a sit-in. It drew attention from the Star-Ledger, newspapers, home news, all over. It was just everywhere. And before I knew it, and I would love to say that I started this protest, but actually a friend who was visiting me was like, where's everybody? And I said, this is it, you're looking at her. And basically, she said, oh, there's something has to be done. And I said to her, well, why didn't you sign up to live here with me so that we could have kept it open? And then next thing you know, they all started moving in, and my room became the kind of central clearinghouse of all the T-shirts, materials, and things of that nature.
What other clubs helped y'all?
The main organization was the African Student Congress, known as the ASC. It is now what's known as UBC. UBC was ASC when I was here. And ASC, the African Student Congress, was the umbrella organization of all black organizations at Rutgers University. And so the E-Board, the executive board of the ASC, kind of oversaw this protest and sit-in.
And how long was the sit-in for?
To me, it seemed like a whole year, but I think it lasted just the spring semester, if I'm not mistaken. It was a while ago. But it was a spring semester in 1987. Okay. And then in the fall of 87, yes, it opened, reopened, and we had a full house.
Full house? All
yes, so my junior and senior year, it was in 88, because it was my senior year that we had a full house. So my junior year is when the protest happened.
And so you got students from Douglas only were able to live in the house, or were other?
Oh no, all of the houses in the Global Village are open to all students here at the university. It's always been that way. All women at Rutgers University can live in Douglas College Global Village. So we had black women students from all of the colleges here at Rutgers. It was awesome. Awesome.
So you said the African Student Congress was involved in getting people to want to sign up, or was that true?
No, they were involved in protesting and getting the administration's attention to keep it open. And as a result of all the coverage that it received, students signed up from all over the university, and it was a full house. So that was as a result of all the attention they got.
Okay. With the Women's Association, Black Women's Association of the Black Community, was that a Douglas organization?
No, it was a university-wide organization, but it was headquartered at Douglas. And actually, it was defunct when I arrived at Douglas, and the two students started it up again as a result of the black women's activism involved with the Africana House. Okay. They didn't want to lose that momentum, so the house was open again. What are we going to do with all this energy and all this unity that was created? So two individuals, one's name was Kathy, I can't remember her last name, and then Kenneth Williams, they started WABA back up again. And because of the role that I played in the sit-in, I did not want a leadership role in WABU, so I stayed as an active member, but I did not run for an executive board office. But I won, and that was a conscious choice of mine.
I thought because in the yearbook, the picture is not up there, you know, of the Black Women's Association. I thought maybe it was because of some other reasons why it was in your directory, and it was not in the main.
It was university. The reason is it was university-wide.
Okay.
In fact, Kathy was a Livingston College student.
Okay.
Kenneth was a Douglas College student. So it was headquartered at Douglas because Kenneth could handle all of the paperwork. But the meetings were held at the Paul Robeson Cultural Center, which then was on College Avenue. So we met on College Avenue, yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. Also, with the black organization at Rutgers, were there any problems that arose within each of the organizations? Did you find any support from all the organizations?
It actually is just like today, just like we are today. In times of crisis, African people tend to come together. And then in times of quiet, it seems as if these natural factions would kind of arise. All trivial in my opinion, but there were kind of, I would say, friendly competition between organizations. But in times of crisis, we were one unit. All of that subsided.
So with the apartheid, like were all the black organizations kind of for that, as far as
yes.
you know, fight for that?
Yes, and then like I said, it wasn't just the black organizations. There were a number of non-black organizations at Rutgers that were also involved in that, but certainly the black organizations were involved in that.
Okay, with the Black Women's Association, what kind of programs did you put on and events did you have?
Actually, it wasn't very program heavy. It was more centered on discussions. In fact, the first year we met at the Paul Robeson Cultural Center, but then after that, our meetings were held in the lounge of the Africana House, because the Africana House was housed in a very big building then because of all the increased interest. It was a full house. So women would come from Livingston, Bush, College Avenue, Cook, and we'd meet in the lounge. And it was mainly discussions about how to preserve the unity, how to eliminate the trivial things that divide us. So it was like I don't know if you've heard of the Douglas Black Students Congress, their Black Thoughts discussions. It was like a Black Thoughts every week.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did, trying to see what else. With that, did you find a lot of people were attending the organization?
Oh yes, it was a great way to get to know the other black women at other campuses because everyone came out to WABA meetings.
Did you were involved in go to any other events that other black organizations put on at that time?
Most definitely. We had a university-wide Black History Month calendar and a pre-Kwanzaa calendar. And they were actually distributed to students at the student events that other black organizations had. So we tried to make sure that we didn't conflict with each other and we could support each other in a lot of the events.
Okay. Let's see. Did you find that you were more active within like Douglas opposed to other campuses?
I was actually more active on other campuses.
Than Douglas? In what ways?
Just like WABA was a university-wide organization, and it's funny, I'm the advisor of DBSC now, but I was not involved in DBSC as a student. WABA was the more visible black women's organization at the time. So definitely I was more involved university-wide because that's just, I knew I was the kind of student that spoke to every black face, whether it was that person was a student, a staff person, a faculty member, whether they worked in the dining hall, they cleaned the residence halls. So I was just always involved. So I usually ate at Broward Commons, my meetings were there. So.
Okay. Also, did you find that the advisory board, the minority advisory board, what was their purpose, Douglas?
The minority advisory, you're talking about the African Student Congress?
No, the
executive board of WABU.
It was the Minority Advisory Board. It's in the Douglas organization.
Oh, that's what I had on
Yeah.
mine? I have no recollection of what that was. I'm not even, according to Fabric, I don't even remember. And actually, now that we're talking, I'm thinking, it was probably, there was a black dean there by the name of Dean Gloria Brewer, who has since passed away. But she was very instrumental in a lot of black students staying connected to Douglas, and I must give her a lot of credit and acknowledgement for kind of making sure that I kept my grades up, kept my GPA up, and I'm sure that's a board that she stuck me on to keep me focused and committed, which is why I do not remember.
Was she the only advisor, I guess?
She was the only
Black?
No. Dean Maxine Summey was the EOF advisor at the time, but I was not an EOF student, so I only knew Dean Brewer.
And what kind of things did she do to try to keep the black community together?
Well, Dean Brewer was the advisor of the Douglas Black Students Congress, but she also, there was an organization called 100 Black Women, and they had a New Jersey chapter. This is a national organization. It's not affiliated with the university at all. And it consisted of black women in corporate and political spheres who served, who just networked with each other. And so the New Jersey chapter started a role model program where they were going to have students come and shadow them. And of all the students at Douglas, Dean Brewer chose me to sign up for this program. And it was one of the most beneficial experiences I had as an undergraduate, getting to see black women who were in the places that I wanted to be one day. And Dean Brewer, who, she was not the most activist, not the most militant, but she did have a heart for black students in her own way, and she funneled us to those programs every time she could. I really appreciate it.
Who were some of the major activists at that time while you were here, along with yourself?
There was Lisa Williamson, who's also Sister Soldier. She was a Douglas student. Kevin Powell, the author, he was, I believe, a Livingston College student. There was the counterpart to WABU was 100 Black Men. So WABU was like sister organization to 100 Black Men. So that's where Kevin Powell and the other brothers on campus were very much involved. And so those were the two that stand out in my mind who are the most visible. There are also others, David McKnight and some others that you may not be aware of, but those are the two most recognized names of students today, Sister Soldier and Kevin Powell.
What was the relationship between the professors and the students during that time when you were here?
The black professors?
Black professors.
The same as they are here. The black professors really, in my opinion, looked out for us, saw to it that we learned and we had what we needed to have. They served as role models, they served as advisors, and sometimes when necessary, they served as kind of disciplinarians in a way kind of to get you back in line and get you focused, which is what we needed.
Did they help you on organizing any of the projects and things that y'all did?
I do not remember any faculty members being in the forefront of the projects, but they were always somewhere in the background with advice, support, names, things of that nature, always, because they're very busy, have very busy schedules, so they helped out whenever they could.
What were some of the programs you remember you attended during your years here?
The programs, there was one put on by the daughters of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, Yolanda King, and I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, Ayatollah Shabazz. They used to have a theater company, and they did a play at Lucy Stone, and I remember catching buses in bitter cold weather to see them.
It was regular?
No, this is just a one-time event. Oh yeah, we couldn't afford them regular. Yeah, one-time event. They always had lecturers coming in from how to live your life, like holistic health, to countering white supremacy, to how it ran the gamut. So if you wanted to be integrated into the society, how to succeed in corporate America, fight of corporate America, whatever the topic. The most phenomenal time. I often tell students, I wish you could have attended Rutgers in the 80s when I was here, because even the parties, there were no detectors. You didn't have to sign in. You just came. You paid your couple of dollars and you came. We sold sodas in the park. I mean, it was just so different than it is now. Even the dynamic between the black men and black women at that time, we danced with each other. It wasn't like the guys standing against the walls and the girls. It just was different. It just was very different.
How did you advertise a lot of the organizations, a lot of the things that y'all put on?
Flyers and word of mouth.
No targum? The targum wasn't?
I don't even remember looking at the targum except to cover issues that were pertinent. I don't ever remember, you know how you look in the targum now to see what's going on? I don't ever remember doing that. There was always flyers and word of mouth. Being involved with BOABU and ASC, we knew what was going on because even now at the UBC meetings, they announce what they're having. So at ASC meetings, we did the same thing.
So you had a calendar, correct? Like calendar was always issued?
There was a calendar, but just like we do today, there were always things added and taken away. So it was primarily word of mouth. And are you going to so-and-so's program? Are you going to the demonstration? Are you going to this presentation? And then we go together as a group.
So what were the apartheid demonstrations about? Where were they located?
Just anywhere on campus getting, I remember the most, the company I remember the most was getting Reebok to divest, and they putting signs saying, you know, one more time, we are not a part of it at all. So it was anywhere at Broward Commons, in front of the Douglas College Center. We had
the black organizations during that time for the apartheid. Was it more the African organizations that were leading the
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Not all the time. Not necessarily. Again, that was just a big concern at the time of any student activist, regardless of their ethnic origin.
Okay. Given the present educational system now, that like we came up in high school, we came into college and then kind of found ourselves, and then wanted, I guess, by taking African studies classes, wanting to then do something. Do you find that it was like that in the 80s, or did y'all come ready to?
I can only speak for myself, and I came ready. I was like that. I mean, I'm being honest. I've had the wonderful opportunity to travel throughout Ghana this past summer, and we had to write an essay. And I started my essay saying, ever since I was 15 years old, I've been interested in black people and in the African diaspora. And I wanted to verify that fact. So I called my mom and I said, about how old was I when I started being interested in black people? And she was like 12. And I'm like, I don't think I was 12, and I think you're wrong. I said, I think that's kind of young. So I'm going to call Dad and check. And I called my father, and he was like 8. So I say that story to say that's literally, I came here. I just was like that. I've always been obsessed with black people and with Africa. And I was 16 years old when I started here as a first-year student. And even then, like I said, I knew I wanted to go to women's college. I knew I was interested in black people and how we came to be who we are, and what causes us to act the way we act, and what makes us beautiful, what makes us unique. And my primary concern is getting us to love each other more, getting black people to love black people more.
So outside of the activism aspect of Rutgers, what was the social life like here?
It was awesome. I told you, the parties were the bomb. I mean, we just interacted, we connected. Doesn't mean that there weren't issues like there always are, but as a whole, we had a more cohesive black community, a more active black community that, as far as fraternity and sorority life goes, the Big 8, they were all involved. I mean, they were all active. No one was suspended. No, I mean, it was just every year they had a line. Every year there were step shows. There was a step show that just took place over this past weekend. That happened once a year when I was here. And students came from schools all over buying their tickets. They would drive up on the weekend in October, November to get a ticket for the Rutgers Step Show. That's how known it was. And it just was a different, totally different environment.
Why do you think it's so different now?
Well, I can tell you why the Step Show ended. When I started out, it started at the Livingston Gym, which is where it was this past weekend. But it had become so popular that it outgrew the gym. I mean, it was standing room only, and my senior year, it was moved to the rack. And people of African descent filled the rack to capacity for that step show. And it was so big that they even had an intermission where they invited local artists. House music, club music was the party music of choice at Rutgers. And so whatever the big club artist of the time was, she would do the song at intermission. I mean, it was that big. And my senior year, they broke down the doors of the rack. And you know, the Rutgers administration was like, no more. So then, you know, later, then people were bringing like, you know, knives and guns to parties, where as before, we were just partying. You know, nobody was doing all of that. And don't get me wrong, occasionally at the step show, if a certain fraternity won, another fraternity felt they should have won. Yes, altercations would break out. I'm not trying to create, like, there was some kind of euphoric utopia here. So there were problems, but it was not the norm. They were typical to what we were used to. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it definitely does. Back to your involvement in the organization that you were with, what were some of the tactics that y'all used to kind of make sure that Rutgers understood and heard your concern?
Well, you know, it's interesting that you should say that, because towards my senior year, there started to be some disagreements within the family in terms of the best tactics to use to get the administration's attention. Because the sit-in around the Africana House was so successful, there were certain students that wanted to sit in everywhere. Every time somebody said something, we were going to storm the dean of Livingston College, you know, his office, and sit in there. We were going to sit, and I'll never forget this as long as I live. So, and we used to have emergency meetings, and emergency meetings were always spread like word of mouth. And you knew if you were in the activist community, emergency meeting, and that meant we were going to meet in the basement of the Paul Robeson Center on College Avenue at a certain time, usually 10, 11 o'clock at night, and we had to make it our business to get there. So this is one of those emergency meetings, and I remember Kevin Powell saying that we can't keep sitting in everywhere. He's like, it's going to reduce our effectiveness if we keep sitting in. And there were certain students saying, no, we've got to do it. And what happened was, I think there was a dean at Livingston at the time, not the dean, but a dean, who had said something that it wasn't outwardly racist, but it was just something that wasn't politically astute. And so this member of ASC wanted to have a whole sit and storm the office. And Monday morning when they walked in, she wanted them to find us sitting there singing "We Shall Overcome," which is what we had done at the Africana House. And I told them that I couldn't do it anymore. I have to graduate there. My father told me that he did not send me to school to travel around step shows and parties and to sit in all the time. He said, I like your activism, but I'm working hard every day. And your grades are slipping. That was another thing. If you were to track our grades that semester that we had to sit in, you would definitely have seen a dip. And, you know, my dad wasn't concerned about the other students, but he was concerned about the one he was paying for. So he made it clear to me that you're going to have to make some choices. So I remember saying that, you know, I know if the sit-in is the way we're going, I can't do it this time. Not only that, there were just things. Remember, my room was kind of the central, and there were things that were missing, things that were left, things that, you know, I was still basically playing cleanup, and I did it all for the cause, don't get me wrong. But also, as a student, I had to make the decision. I wanted to graduate on time, do certain things. And I remember Kevin Powell saying, just no. Like, he and I were the only two, kind of like saying, we're not doing it this time. And we were kind of like the pariahs at the time of the group. But that's how he and I got to know each other. And actually, he came back to Rutgers last year to speak for me during Black History Month. But that's how we got to know each other, because we really we would always acknowledge each other and speak, but we really did not know each other before kind of.
Did y'all suggest anything?
He did. He always had a solution, but I don't remember what it was. I just was like, you can choose. I was the kind of person, I went along with what the majority wanted to do, but I stood firm in my convictions. It was something that I wasn't going to do. It wasn't because I didn't believe in what they were doing. I just couldn't do it at that time, and I always stood my ground.
There was an article I read in Targum that spoke about the organization not receiving funding from the RCG yet.
I don't remember that at all, because with BWABL, because BWABL was a Douglas organization, we received our funding from Douglas.
Oh, okay.
So we did not have funding, the same funding issues that other organizations had. But I do remember there being issues about them not receiving as much funding as the other organizations, but because BWABL was a Douglas organization, we didn't have that issue, so I was not involved in that.
The university as a whole, did you find any objections to a lot of things that y'all were doing, like administration, outside the sit-ins, obviously?
No.
So they were.
I didn't find it. I'm not saying it didn't exist, but I did not experience that. Particularly at Douglas, they were very supportive of women being involved. And again, Douglas's angle was, we closed the house because there were no students signed up to live there. So once we brought attention to that and there were students signed up to live there, it was a moot point. It's been existing ever since.
What is your capacity now that you do at Rutgers? What do you do now?
Now I am the director of the Office of Student Involvement and Leadership at Douglas College. And I'm also the director of the Africana House. Who knew? Who knew? So, and I've definitely enjoyed that. I've worked at Douglas for 10 years, and I've worked with the Africana House for 6 years.
Before we end, do you have anything else you have to say about your activism at Rutgers?
That it helped develop me into the person that I am today. It was the best 4 years of my life. And I don't know if that's saying great things about Rutgers or Douglas or not.